Hi friends, this is Seth Gruber with Life Training Institute, and this is my series of pro-life training videos called Pro-Life Thinking Thursdays, where each week I examine an argument in defense of the pro-choice position and provide you with the pro-life response to that argument. And I do this in hopes that you will be equipped with the tools that you need to defend your pro-life beliefs about the humanity and value of the unborn child to your friends, family members, and coworkers, and in a culture and society that dehumanizes the unborn. And this week is episode 14, and this week I wanted to examine the question, is the unborn baby entitled to rights of personhood? The pro-life response to this question is that yes, the unborn child is entitled to rights of personhood, because the science of embryology teaches us that the unborn child is a distinct, living, and whole human being who shares our common human nature and value, because there's no value-giving difference between who you once were in the womb and who you are now that would justify taking you at that earlier stage in the womb. So yes, the unborn child is entitled to rights of personhood, and there's no difference between being a human being and being a human person. But the pro-choice response to this question is that no, the unborn child is not entitled to rights of personhood, because the unborn child, they say, lacks certain functions and capacities that we as born people have. But they don't explain why the possession of these functions and capacities grant us value at all. They just assume that persons must have certain functions to have value. And since the unborn child doesn't have these functions, they're not a person and we can kill them through legalized abortion. I'm going to give you at least 4 of those differences or functions that they say the unborn child doesn't have to justify abortion. The first is this. Pro-choice advocates say the unborn child is not entitled to rights of personhood because the unborn child cannot feel pain. Secondly, the unborn child is not viable, which means it cannot survive outside the womb. Thirdly, the unborn child is not self-aware. And lastly, the unborn child does not have brain waves or brain activity. But the lack of these functions or capacities to take personhood away from someone or not grant someone personhood are bad differences, because there are born people like you and I who cannot feel pain, who are not viable in that we cannot survive apart from being dependent on something or someone else. There are born people who are not self-aware when they're unconscious or when they're in a coma. And there are born people who do not have brain activity or brain waves for various reasons. And so we can't strip the unborn child of personhood and justify abortion when they lack these functions, because there are born people who would fit in that category as well, and we would reject the lack of those functions for killing born people. Notice all of these lack of functions that pro-choice advocates say mean the unborn child does not have personhood beg the question, because the unborn child, they assume the unborn child is not a human being like you and I, without proving that the unborn child is not a human being like you and I. And we know that they're assuming the unborn child is not a human because they wouldn't accept the lack of these functions for killing born people. At the end of the day, if the pro-life case is sound, which is that from the earliest stages of development, the unborn child is a distinct, living, and whole human being. And if it's true that there's no meaningful difference between who we once were in the womb and who we are today that would justify killing us in the womb, if those two cases are sound that prove the humanity and value of the unborn child, then any pointing to differences or lack of functions between born people and unborn people are not relevant in determining personhood. So the unborn child is a distinct, living, and whole human person from the moment of conception, and therefore abortion is a moral wrong. If you would like to follow up with me on more of these questions or other questions related to the abortion issue, please reach out to me on my blog at sethgruber.com. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to being with you next week for Pro-Life Thinking Thursdays.